Today, we have an opportunity to visit with a very special gentleman, Lee Kemp. Lee, really excited to have you here for our Coaches Council podcast, or Heads Up podcast. Mike, I'm really excited about this one. This is an opportunity. Here we are at the United States Olympic Training Center, Colorado Springs. We happen to run into Lee. Lee's working with the national team. We were just finishing up with our developmental camp here today and tomorrow. So how could we not bring in Lee Kemp?
Kid in a candy shop.
Yeah, we're all excited. So Lee, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me here.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Like the Gable match, there was, now that I'm talking about this, but I first met him in 1972 as a sophomore in high school. In my first year of wrestling with a 500 record, less than 4 years later, I'm wrestling in a match.
I was putting that time frame together when you were talking yesterday.
It's less than 4 years.
That's crazy.
And I had just started, he was 26 when I wrestled him in 1975, so he was still young and working out all the time. And when I met him, he was a month later going to go win his gold medal in Munich. So he's well, he was 23. Yeah, he was 23 when I met him.
Didn't you wrestle him twice?
No, just once.
I thought you wrestled him like at the Northern, and then.
Well, the Northern was the only time I wrestled him.
You didn't wrestle him at Tbilisi or someplace like that?
No. He had retired. I mean, he came back, and I think it was his fan base kind of encouraging him to come back. But and the pundits in the social media, what do they call them, world warriors, the keyboard warriors or whatever. Yeah. They said, oh, he had a pinched nerve in his neck and all this. He was not 100%, and it wasn't a real match. It was just it was a warm-up thing. I said, it was a real match. It was a tournament. He entered a college tournament. Well, it wasn't, and he was hurt and this and that. So now I'm going to say, for the record, I was probably 3 months away from a complete elbow dislocation too.
Wow.
Never said that anymore.
Wow.
Because the summer before, I made the junior world team. And very first match in July, I just fully dislocated my elbow. Fully dislocated my elbow. And then that was in July, and so the following November is when the Northern Open was. So 4 months, and my arm, I can move about like this. But was that a problem I had? Of course it was.
Yeah.
Did he have a pinched nerve in his neck? Maybe.
Maybe he did.
Yeah. So I just want to get that out there.
We've all got
man.
Yeah.
How many times do you enter battle in the finals of a tournament that you're 100%?
Never.
That doesn't happen. It's unrealistic.
You're never that way. You're never that way. I mean,
How do you keep your mindset okay through all this? Right? I'm injured, and we know that we're in, coaching Phil Simpson in the NCAA finals. And I remember Esposito comes off the mat from Oklahoma State after the semis. His eyes swollen shut, he's limping, there were people around that were like, Phil, you got this, look at him, he's all beat up. I'm like, this man's made it to the NCAA finals. Do not listen to these people that are saying he's beat up and he's hurt. You go out there because he's not gonna back down for you. He's not gonna say, oh, my eyes swollen shut, so I'm gonna go out and lay down in the NCAA finals. And he didn't. He came out and he wrestled hard. And I don't know if that changed the outcome of the match, but I think how do you prep to go into a match when is it every opponent is ready for me?
You adjust a little bit.
Yeah.
I remember the Gable stories. I remember him being injured going into the Olympic Games, right? That was common because he hurt his knee badly prior to the Olympic Games. I think he had 4 months before. And so he had his knee heavily damaged in the games, and ever since he hurt it. So he couldn't do all the things that he probably would have wanted to do with that knee either, but you never would have noticed it by watching the matches.
Right.
So was he 100% for that? No. And then he got the big gash. I mean, that's distraction, having to come back. And could have been disqualified. I mean, there's some referee or however the rules are. I mean, it could have been in the rules, or it could have been just somebody just trying to get Gable out of the tournament.
Right.
Because I remember that discussion being had during the Olympic Games. I remember I was watching it intently, and so Bill Farrell, there's a room named after him here. I mean, he very intelligently, he understood the international game and how meaning the Russians knew that well, if we can get Gable out, then that would be great for us. So that's why he hurried up and bandaged his head up.
Wow.
That was the reason, just to
wasn't-
get him back out there, because it was a bad gash. And if the trainers would have come over, who maybe could have been a Soviet trainer or whatever, oh, you can't wrestle. That's too bad of a gash. And once you make the call and it's over, it's over. So he shushed him away from the corner, and we're handling it. However, and they just start bandaging his head right away. You can see it in the video, in the film. And they just pushed him out there, and Gable just walked back out there. And it wasn't like it was even against somebody even good. It just happened. Just a headbutt or something, and now he's got a big gash, bleeding all over the place. So,
How tough are the politics involved at
it's
that
huge.
level?
It's huge. Which is why the team leader role is a big role. I always thought it was just some ceremonial thing that really didn't mean much. But every team leader, freestyle team leader, Greco team leader, they're a person that is familiar, obviously, with wrestling. A lot of them were former wrestlers, but more importantly, they're businessmen that have some financial wherewithal, because when you protest a call, it's money involved.
Right.
I don't know, you might know the numbers more than me, but it's not like you're paying $50 to protest. It's a lot of money.
It's big money. Yeah, you got to put up or shut up.
I thought it was, well, at least
Internationally,
I thought it was in the
international.
thousands.
Oh, I'm sure it is now. Absolutely.
And so when I heard the number, I thought, wow.
Yeah,
So it's not, like big, like more than $5,000 kind of thing. Like
Yeah.
it's like, do you really want to protest this call? Okay. And so they're probably
More than we carry around in our pocket.
Yeah, it's probably scam. They'll probably use that as a way to just scoop up money too.
Sure.
But the team leaders are in a position to do those kind of things for the wrestler, right? Because they're out there competing in the Olympic Games or the World Championships, and something happens that we're going to protest a call. I mean, that goes beyond throwing the brick, right? That we're talking about where you really make a formal protest and you never win them. But you do it because at least you're trying something.
Fairness.
Fairness.
Did you have a lot of political controversy that you had to deal with?
There was one that I'm going to try to explain it, but if you ever have a chance to talk to Stan Desick, I would feel more comfortable him telling you, because Stan was the years I was, my prime years, or really the years I was competing, Stan was our national coach. In fact, he was the first national coach that we ever had in wrestling. The whole concept of a national coach was when the AAU formed, AU controlled wrestling back, from the beginning until I think 1982 is when the UFWF, they changed their name to USA Wrestling, but they were USWF, but prior to that it was the AU, and Stan was the first national coach hired by Newt Koppel. Those are names that go way back. Newt Koppel was the leader of wrestling. He'd be like the Rich Bender of the AAU, I guess. But anyway, I mentioned Stan because Stan Desick, because he was our national coach, but just a very the guy has so many different facets to his personality and talent. Became very successful in the financial world too, and that only happened because that whole thing with AAU ended, right? When the USWF that became the USA Wrestling took over AAU, it just abolished all that. They came and took it over basically, and that was a huge court battle that went on because AAU fought it for a long time.
Sport organizations really wanted to have a voice how to control their own destiny.
Yes.
Whether it was coaching development, international travel, competition, and so what really went down is like AAU was governing everything at that particular time, and the sport organizations then in '82, I guess it was, if that sounds right, that the individual NGBs became in existence. Like they had control over their own sport, which I think it definitely was the right thing at the time.
Yes.
Now wrestling controls wrestling, and certainly the biggest thing was how are we going to select our national team?
It's crazy.
Yeah, different time, different world. And here we are today. And by the way, now that we are here today, one of the questions that I wanted to ask you is, you were here back in '78, right? Wasn't
Very
that
first one.
Very first one? And you're here today. I mean,
That year was 1978. That's a long
Okay,
ago.
we're not going to go into detail of that.
Are we the only guys in the room?
Yeah, no, I wasn't here then. I was very aware of what was happening at that time, you know, but my question to you would be, you're here today, this facility and the personnel and everything is obviously a lot different. What is different? What is maybe the same that you see now that you're here on campus and get a chance to see the developmental camp, work with the national team, et cetera? What are your thoughts on all of that?
The first thing that I see that is the same is just the awe of inspiration when you come on this campus. And when I came in 1978, it was a military base.
Mm-hmm.
You might know what branch of the military. But
I don't remember what it was, but I definitely remember walking in it the first time, and it looked like a military base.
Because that's what it was.
I believe the Air Force used it to command NORAD, the big
Okay.
city in the mountains.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was a NORAD
There you go.
command station.
And so I think when we got here, the only thing that had happened prior to that was maybe the military officials just handed the keys over.
Mhm.
That was about it. There was nothing done. So we walk in, and there was none of the statues and the face with all the nice buildings, and then that graphic thing of the people holding up the globe and all that. All that's real inspirational stuff.
Yeah.
And all the signage. It was just a military base, man. It was like it was nothing here, but no wrestling facility. We practiced at the high school here.
Deaf and blind?
Yes. So we walked there, and they had mats, and then the food was not that military food's not the greatest, but believe me, military people aren't eating gourmet food.
I
Right?
remember walking into the cafeteria when I first came out here, and it was like walking into an old mom and pop diner.
Yeah, it's like food. You know, we're all wrestling want to eat now, but it's like, I mean, you know, we were still here. You're just excited to be there, and it was my first world team, and I was excited to be with all the legends that I read about, and the Petersons for sure, because I remember them, and Gable was the coach, and you know, he was everybody's hero, really my hero too, and to have him coach me for the first time, and I knew Stan really well. Stan was the coach at Michigan State. There's a whole story about that. You know, Stan was the assistant coach at Michigan State. I wanted to go there. I knew him when I was a junior in high school. Anyway, it didn't work out. Didn't work out that I went there. So I knew Stan, so I got a chance to see people that I had respected and looked up to. And Stan was, of course, a world champion the year before. So in '77, and in '76, though, I was an alternate to Stan, and the Olympic Games were in Montreal, and I actually lost to Wade Chalice, but took second because Stan beat Wade and Wade beat me, but that was the point system, the bad mark system, so I took second, and but I actually beat Stan. You know, I ended up beating Stan, and I lost to Wade. And so what we call Final X now, whatever. So the match is to actually make the team. Wade got injured in that match, the very first match. Anyway, Wade got injured wrestling Stan, and he got injured to the point where he couldn't continue anymore. I mean, he was done. He had to withdraw from all of it. So it was just Stan and myself, and so I did the 3 matches to make the team with Stan. And the first match I beat him, and then he beat me the next 2 pretty easily, actually. They were, I think the first match was like 7-1, it was like 7-4 the next one. He made a significant adjustment against me in those tournaments. That's just the way Stan is, just such a tactician, and he had invested quite a lot of his life. You know, he was like 28 years old, I was only 19, and that was his moment of truth to make that damn team, you know, and this young kid's coming up. And I beat Gable that year too, so, you know, that was the year I was...
You weren't under the radar anymore.
No, not at all. And he was ready for the match. It's just the way, you know, our styles clashed. I won, and then he made a significant adjustment. And then anyway, so now his matches with Wade, the very first match, Wade got injured, hurt his neck, and, you know, they took, you know, put a neck brace on him, and he was done. So Stan won, and I was, would have been third, but I got elevated up to second. So I got to go to the camp as the alternate, and it was cool. I got to be on the team, got all the gear. It was, I was the alternate, not the first team gear, but I was there as alternate to Stan. So I went to Montreal and trained with him a little bit. Stan had his own little routine and stuff, but I was there as an alternate to help him get ready, help him do all the things he needed to do, and watch the win a bronze medal. And kind of in my mind, I was thinking, man, I could beat that guy too. I could beat that guy. Man, I could have probably taken third. Or I probably could have beaten this other guy. So, get you thinking about wrestling. Get you thinking, have you dreaming something.
It sounds like an important part of your development is to see it.
Yes, to see it. Oh, absolutely.
Huh.
So I'm thinking 1980s. I was laser focused on that now because it's only 4 years away now, and I was still in college, so I had that to accomplish. I hadn't even really seriously thought about how I was going to be Olympic champion, but to be there at that tournament. And of course, with Keyser was there, I got to work out him. I mean, everybody, all my heroes, the Petersons, Gene Davis, Jimmy Carr. I knew Jimmy Carr because he and I had the same age. And then Jan Gitcho, I think he was a 14-pounder or 105-pounder. And, I kind of got to know all the people all the way up the ladder, And we were in the room, just like the room here. I'm in the room and I belong there. I'm one of the people that are supposed to be there. I guess I was probably one of the youngest guys there at the time. And
Lee, with that said, you are this young kid in the beginning of your career. All these guys that you have sort of idolized, they've been the guys you've looked to for your development. How were you able to make that adjustment? I mean, no disrespect, 4-time All-American in college, but certainly arguably you really shined in the international scene, right, with the 3 world championships, etc. So how did that happen? I mean, you're still college minded, you're in the college mindset, and here you're competing against your idols in freestyle. Did freestyle come more naturally to you, or what was it that not a lot of guys have ever done that, to make that transition up from folk style into freestyle that dramatically, especially at that age?
I think the key is the style of wrestling that I learned at Wisconsin. And I have to kind of give Russ Hullison the credit for that. He was our assistant coach, and he was on that team.
Right.
So he was an actively competing, and he was our coach at Wisconsin.
Yep.
So, Russ made that 76 Olympic team too, and he was a silver medalist.
Right.
So while I was there in Montreal, I'm looking at a guy I knew really well. He's my coach, and I saw what he did in the room back in Wisconsin. He trained really hard. He was kind of a leader to us all of us Wisconsin guys that were there. So I think the first key to all that was just having somebody that very close to us that was there also. And they were building their credentials too. And he was, he had aspirations of being Olympic and world champion. We were on a world team together the year before that, or a couple of years after that, 1979, where Russ also won a silver medal.
Right.
And then we were all tracked to that 80 year, the 80 team. And Russ made that team too.
Did you see that as a track to get you to 80?
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. That was, and I think the style that Russ taught was that high-level single leg style. So to answer your question, your original question, the transition for me would have been a difficult one if it wasn't for just the savviness of Dan Gable. He said, Lee, don't worry about freestyle, just take people down. And I was like, I could do that. I said, yeah, you can do that. Just take them down, don't worry about it. If they started moving fun, let's let them go. Not let them go, but you're only in the mat for 3-4. Don't get busy there, just kind of take them down and just kind of hang out for 5 seconds and put you back up.
Let's not make this too complicated.
Yes,
just take them down.
and if you start, but if you start trying to do too much stuff, then you get rolled. See, in collegiate style, where to your original question really is pointing toward, the big transition for most wrestlers is learning how those tilts come so quick. And you're used to maybe crab riding and doing different things in college. If you do that in freestyle, you're giving up lots of points, And I wasn't a big rider anyway in college, and Dan knew that. Just take him down. Don't worry about anything else. And that's all I did. I didn't turn anybody. turn anybody. And I didn't get turned either. And that was back in the days where they put you down for stalling. So they worked a lot with me. They, Stan and Gable, Dan on parterre, bottom parterre. I remember the first couple weeks of camps, I was getting turned like a top, you know. And then it less and less, and finally they couldn't turn me anymore. So it was by design. So if I got taken down, I could fight, not get turned, get back on my feet, and I'm going to take you down. My matches were 7-4, 1 point takedowns, but 2 points are always, you're always going to give up. Your opponent's always going to get 2 points because of the stalling. Mm-hmm. They would call you for stalling, and then you'd give up 2 bad marks, which are actual points, you know, to your opponent. If you're called, that's almost the shot. It's like variations of the shot clock, basically. Okay. You're going to give the other guy a point if you don't take him down in the shot clock, or you're going to give the guy a point if you're stalling. And so you had officials kind of arbitrarily calling you for stalling.
But in the old days, that was so important because if your opponent scores, that increases or it changes the black point system.
Right. Yeah, true.
So it made
true.
a difference.
Yes,
so any points on the board made a difference.
Yes.
And I think officials were fully aware of that. It's like, you know, there's a huge separation if you shut your opponent out versus if they actually scored. I think it was 3-1 versus 4-0 at the time. It changed a couple of times, if I remember right. So yeah, you're absolutely right. That does make a difference. And you saw officials, they're likely not going to allow that guy not to score points.
Yeah.
You know, some way, somehow. And if that's a passivity or stalling call, we're going to make it.
Yeah.
If it happens to be a country that gives an envelope to an official.
Exactly.
That happens a lot, I'm sure. And you know, it happened.
Yeah.
It happened. So for me, the transition, and I learned more freestyle as I got into more camps, but my style of wrestling didn't deviate a whole lot. I wasn't gut-wrenching people, and although toward my last, like that second quad, when the boycott happened, I had to dig in and I knew I had to kind of get better. So I got probably better technically from 81, 82. 83, by then my focus had changed, but I knew I had to try out for the Olympic team in 84, but I was going to grad school then, and I just wasn't the same. But I'd say the 1982 World Championships was my best year technically of me just evolving as who I was going to evolve to be as a wrestler. You could see the differences, you know, the technique was very more refined. But then the rules changed too. The first quad through 80, if your head was down, you were considered stalling. And you can't stall pretty good if your head buried. And so the officials, you couldn't have your head down at all. So you had to have your head up, almost like a Greco-Roman match. And that's where my style, that standing straight up style, kind of came from. And so when I got into freestyle, it was easy. My head stays up. I had a high level style anyway. I'm grabbing elbows, just hitting high level singles. So, and then with Dan telling me just take people down, and then I learned how to defend if I did get down, which you always did because of the passivity. And then after 80 to 84, the rules changed to where now if your head's up, you're stalling. So you had to have your head, because I guess officials figured out, because that's how they do it in Greco. So, you know, if you could, you know, so they probably really, to shoot, you got to have your head down and dig in there and low-level singles and stuff. So I didn't wrestle that way. So I had to really change my style of wrestling to get in the lower stands, forehead to forehead, high crotches, low-level singles. I could do all that stuff, but for me, I evolved as a high-level single type of person. So I would say that, and I'm proud of the fact that I did make that adjustment, and then my technique got really good, got really sharp with high crotches, not getting gut, because you can get gut wrenched, you get crotch lifted there. It's part of the reason why I didn't go to my knees. And that's part of the reason why Gable didn't want me to go to my knees when I was starting out. Because to your question early about freestyle adapting, yeah, if you don't adapt to freestyle and you're used to shooting low-level singles and you're coming out of college in the 70s, you're going to get crotch lifted a lot. And I didn't shoot that way. And Gable just said, you know, I know you know how to do that, but now this plays right into how you wrestle. He kind of built me up, made me understand that you could beat these guys just by the way you wrestle.
How does that feel when Gable says like?
Oh, I believed it.
Yeah.
And I worked out with him a lot too, and I wrestled him, and you know, I knew, and even though I beat him, I mean, he was better than me, but I knew that at least I could wrestle with him. If we'd have wrestled again, I mean, who knows? I might have I won again. I mean, and I always want to bring this out in that match with Gable. I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but he was up a weight class. So anyone watching this who thinks weight classes and weight doesn't matter, it does. Even if you're as good as Dan Gable, he can't just not arbitrarily, but he can't just go up a weight class from 149 to 158. So he entered the Northern Open at 158, and I was a strong 158 pounder, who had a lot of confidence, and I was learning this good basic style from Russ, and you couldn't move me, I was strong and I was in great shape. Russ understood that whole process because he was an Olympian himself, and he was a world medalist himself, part of that. And so Dan said 3 things after the match. I read about it in the paper before the internet and all that kind of stuff. He said, Lee's very strong, and I tell kids when I'm coaching them, who controls how strong you are. And I grew up on a farm and all that kind of stuff, so I knew I was strong. So I had that confidence. I mean, when someone's strong, I think you're strong, right? So, and because of the strength and the positional style of wrestling that I learned at Wisconsin, and my high school coach was that way, positionally strong. He understood wrestling from learning it. He wasn't really a wrestler himself, but he just was a student of wrestling. So if you're really strong and you understand position, you're really hard to set up. You're really hard to score on because you're not giving up any position. And I was from the mindset, you don't give up any position at all. Some wrestlers give up position a little bit. I didn't give up any position at all. And then the conditioning element. Gable said I couldn't get him tired, so I couldn't get him tired. He was really strong, and I could get him out of position. And so that made me think, well, you could be anybody if you could do those things. So that's why I was able to win internationally right away through, because if you look at those matches, man, they were just pretty basic. It wasn't a freestyle match. It was just me hitting a single leg and getting a takedown. And then I came from an era of a lot of really scientific positioning of your hands. I don't want to call it hand fighting as much as it's controlling the tie-ups. Because we weren't fighting. The other guy was fighting us. We were just controlling the tie-ups so well that the other wrestler was just fighting constantly. And so I got really good at controlling tie-ups. And Russ taught that. I understood why you would tie up an inside, outside, elbow tie, baseball tie. You don't see that today. I know that if I was wrestling today, I would do very well because no one really likes to tie up. And I would be very committed to tying. I was strong enough to get my tie-ups. And I would be very persistent until I got the tie-up that I wanted. While I'm tying you up, you can't shoot, so you won't be able to do anything. I would disrupt anything that you would try to do. Like I don't even let someone tie up on my head even. Right. We were so fixated on that at Wisconsin.
That came from the coaching philosophy.
Yes, at Wisconsin, yeah.
For the coaches that are watching and getting a chance to listen to us, how does that philosophy develop? Like, did you ever get into that with Russ? Did he learn that from his coach? Was it passed down? Was it something that he noticed at the time? Hey, this is going to work now. This is better now. How do you believe he developed that philosophy, and how do you develop your philosophies as you're training and coaching and helping athletes?
Well, the way I would answer that is, as I have evolved now, and I think we all can agree, to be a good wrestler, you have to be pretty smart. There's a high level of intellect as it pertains to motor skills and translating that and being able to translate seeing something and then being able to translate it into actually doing it and breaking down technique. It's pretty cerebral, I think. I mean, some people do it a little easier than others, and you just kind of think of wrestling as a physical sport, and people think, oh, it's just strong people doing it. It's way more than that. It's pretty cerebral. So Russ is a very intelligent guy, even though he's a big guy, 220 pounder. I mean, Russ could have been a doctor. I mean, he was very intellectual. So I was around intellectual people like Stan, and I think, and he was a good wrestler too, right? So Dan's really intellectual when it comes to wrestling. And so it played right to my personality, I think, to start with. But anyway, Russ created that technique, and the whole team did it. And it wasn't like you absolutely 100% have to do this, but that's all we did at practice, So it was more of a class. We go to class and we learned a whole series of technique, and just kind of like back in my era, Oklahoma State, they were leg riders, right? So if you're going to be an Oklahoma State wrestler, you better be ready for legs. And there's other teams who had certain things that they did, like the Grammy School of Wrestling, high school, right? So we were a single leg team. And it was before, in fact, think how funny this is now. Russ taught us to take people down and let them go, get 2 points for 1. We'd take people down and just let them go. And because it was in the 70s, a lot of the old school coaches, like Chesborough maybe, or maybe, I don't think Myron was coaching then, they said, oh, they're stalling.
By letting them up.
They wanted us to just
Stay on that mat.
get in there, get on that mat. You're stalling. You don't. I mean, take them down, let them go. Take them. So you beat a guy like 20-10, 20-12. Jim Haynes did that. Another Wisconsin wrestler. And
I felt the wrath of Jimmy Haynes.
Yes.
We were talking about that earlier.
And Russ would do that as a heavyweight. Well, even on the freestyle level, you take it down. If you can't turn them, hey, I'm making another takedown. And Russ wrestled in some college tournaments because the only way to get competition during the 70s was like the Midlands, which was a high-level college tournament. So everybody was in the Midlands. Like Chalice was in the Midlands, Desic. They were a weight above me, thank goodness. So, but I was at 58. Desic and Chalice they were at 67. But the Petersons all wrestled in it. Gable was gonna wrestle in it. He was gonna wrestle in the Northern Open and then the Midlands. But he decided after the Northern Open he would retire after he wrestled me. But because he realized it just wasn't as important to him anymore.
Right.
But he was young enough. I mean, he was 26 or 27. But to your question, it was a system. Like had I gone to another school, I would have struggled in freestyle like everybody else because I would have learned college wrestling. I would have probably been on more on the mat, rope riding and whatever, and just shooting low singles. Because I could shoot low singles. Like I did in high school, everybody did in high school, And I didn't know what high single was in high school. I shot low and got like everybody else, So if I'd have went to another college and evolved that way, I like to think I still would have been a national champion because I would have had the desire, I would have learned how to win that way. But then that transition would have been like, I would have been getting crushed. I wouldn't have made the team. Because I think back, I was strong, I kept good position, and I hit high level single legs. And we hand fought, standing up with head up, because that was the rules back then. You just don't use the word hand fighting, because we weren't fighting, the other person was fighting us. We were just controlling those ties. We would grab a baseball tie, elbow tie, I don't want to give the Russians credit for a Russian arm tie, but 2-on-1s. I mean, we learned all that at Wisconsin. We learned it as maybe where they were learning how to ride legs at Oklahoma State, we were learning how to 2-on-1s, baseball ties, chopping the arms, dragging, not letting people on our heads. We were learning how to pull your neck up so they don't get a good grip on your neck and roll your shoulder. So it was easy for Jimmy to beat people like that. You said you wrestled. You know what that felt like to wrestle. And all he was doing was hitting signals. You probably wanted him to just stay in one spot,
I just wanted him to leave me alone. I was just like, hey, give me some mercy. He turned me with his legs in a freestyle tournament. And so I learned. I told you that's the story. I went over and I asked him. He probably doesn't remember this today. Like we were talking, a lot of times people, when you talk to them, they probably don't remember those kind of periods of their life. But I asked him, I went over after I got beat, and I said, hey, what in the world were you doing with your legs? And he went into this, he kind of looked at me like, okay, I'll show you. And so to this day, I still have that philosophy about how to really engage with with leg wrestling. It's a little bit different feel that I had never felt before with him. And so Jimmy, if you're out there listening, so
gotta make sure you
kudos. Yeah, definitely. But it was at, I think it was a UNI Open that I ran into him, and he was tough, man. So anyway, I don't want to take away from your story, but yeah, definitely, I get it. And so back
we learned that from Russ.
Yeah.
Russ was teaching that to Jim Haynes. Russ, 220-pounder,
teaching legs.
Jimmy 114. They'd be drilling together, drilling all the stuff.
That's great.
The high level stuff, the controlling tie-ups, the Russian arm tie, baseball tie, chopping the arm, popping the arm, all that stuff. And the way that he turned you was what we all learned. But I picked it up, Jimmy picked it up, and I could turn people like that too. I ended up having
Well, no, not to go down with you either.
A power half then goes, it's legs and a power half is what it is, and you get elbow control. But we learned that. But that was back in the day. You could have a whole group of wrestlers and teach them all the same thing, and they won't like declare mutiny.
Right.
You can't. It's hard to do that today. Kids today would just.
We're not all doing the same.
Yeah. But we did the same thing. We were like.
I did embarrass him though, by the way. I reversed him in a freestyle tournament. So I think that might have been the only points I scored in the whole damn match. So.
Gotta get this to Jimmy.
Yeah, gotta get it to Jimmy. So, and it's like, he was working across the body. He tried the
Yes.
power half, but he'd go across the
Yes.
body with his Turk because he had high heel lands.
Yes.
And I'll never forget, that was our conversation
Yes.
after it was over.
Doug Moses wrote that. I learned it from Doug
Yes.
Moses.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that
That's the same
It was
era of wrestlers from that
freestyle.
era.
It was freestyle, but yet he was still committed to go after it because he wasn't going to turn me with guts or laces, but he definitely turned me with that. So it's like, dang.
So it all goes back to coaching.
Yeah,
It
that's
all goes back
interesting.
to coaching. If I didn't have that foundation, I'd have been like everybody else, just tracking through. And if I could have stuck with it, maybe I would have made a world team after four or 5 years, maybe. But
Lee, I got to go back to one thing, and it's like you briefly went over it, but in 1980, right? How, as an athlete, I mean, as you look back on it now, I mean, there was a lot of things going on at that time. You make the team, everybody's anticipating, you know, we're going to travel, wrestle in the Olympics, and it doesn't happen. How did that affect you? What do you remember about that back in the day, and how is it in reflection, where, like today, what's it mean to you?
The only way I can really make it clear so the audience can get the full gravity of it all, it was like a death, really. It was like a death of a loved one, a spouse or a child, or now that I'm a parent. I mean, it was that deep. It was something that you're never going to get over,
Right.
that you just have to learn to live with it. And I think that was one of the things that put me on kind of this trajectory that really is, if you look at my documentary and some of the writers and some of the people that kind of were involved in making that documentary, they picked up on that. They said that this seems like these series of events in wrestling put you on a trajectory that really affected your whole life. And that's how devastating it was. And then you start making bad decisions on top of that, because maybe you're not in the right mental frame of mind, because you're always operating from this place of loss and this place of need or something. I don't know. Or it would be, those words would be applicable to losing a loved one. You know, that person's not there anymore. You're trying to figure out a way to live without them and live with that void, or
You never get it back.
you never get it back either.
What was the loss that you felt? Like, I mean, certainly right not having the medal itself, but was it deeper than that?
It was deeper than that. It was who I thought I was. It's more of a psychological manifestation of who we all think we are. Like when we, each of us, and anyone looks in the mirror, okay, we're used to seeing ourselves, but if you ever just stop and stare at this reflection in the mirror, it's different than a photograph, because a mirror, whenever you move, the reflection moves, so it almost seems real. So you start trying to figure out, well, like, who is this person and what's behind those eyes? What are they thinking? So psychologically, the manifestation of who I thought I was this Olympic champion. It wasn't the medal, it was who I thought I was. It's almost like if you are an actor and then you're not an actor anymore. And if you're, a damn good actor, like whoever, like a
Tom Cruise.
and all of a sudden you're not an actor in your prime. It's taken away from you. So you got to find something else that it's not just something you're good at, it's where you have identified yourself. We all know wrestling, we all know Gable. What if at 26 years old, he couldn't be a wrestling coach? Like, what was he going to do with his life? He could have figured it out maybe, but that was exactly where he wanted to be. That was every day he got up, and he could look at himself, and he knew who he was in terms of that. I didn't know who I was anymore. I needed that to characterize who I thought I was. And I could go from there and do other things, but because I met people who were former greats in whatever it was, but they have that core thing that they became good at. And you look at anyone who's good today, like maybe a Tom Cruise or even a scientist or a doctor or a Nobel Prize winner, whatever, that's who they built themselves up to be. And if that's taken away, at least in that example, they always have that. At the point that they step off, they still have those things. I never got there. I never got the distinction of being an Olympic champion. I remember once being at a USA Wrestling function with a lot of our Olympic champions and stuff, and I was there too. And I remember a photographer wanted to take a picture of the Olympic champions. I was standing in a group of everybody, and I know everybody, and finally when that was said, the Olympic champions just started moving over to the wall for the photo. And but before he said it, I just thought it was going to be just a group photo.
Right.
And I knew Dake, and I'm walking over there too, and then they go, well, just us Olympic champions. I'm like, oh my God, that's like, and this happened like 5 or 6 years ago. So it's like, if you can get over it, fine, but then there's a constant reminder. There's a reminder every 4 years. Every time there's an Olympiad, well, I'm happy for the Olympians, but you think about it, and I don't even really want to. I mean, I want to watch it. I'm not bitter or anything, but every 4 years you have to kind of deal with it again, and so that's exactly what it's like, at least for me. And I know that people who are as deeply committed into it as I was felt the same way. I think everybody did. Mm-hmm. I can't think of anybody that was at that level that can make that team that went through this didn't feel the same way. Now, I like to think I had a really good shot at being a gold medalist too, and don't want this to come across arrogant at all, because I don't want it to be that way. I think you have to have a certain amount of confidence to be an Olympic champion and all that, but whatever that confidence was, I had it all. I was gonna be an Olympic champion. I would have lost an arm in a match if that meant, there was no hesitation. I would have given anything and everything that it took to be an Olympic champion, and just have it like taken away. It was like it's like I still can't even comprehend it. It's like something that there was no precedent for it ever happening, and we just all thought that we're gonna get to go. They're gonna just change your mind. And Gable, there was no social media then, so Gable had to contact us all by phone or whatever, and he did. He told us to just keep training, just don't look at the newspapers, just, we're going to do everything we can to get you guys so you can compete. So we felt like Gable's going to make this happen for us, and the coaches and this and that. And then when it finally happened that we weren't going, it was, some wrestlers quit, like Jimmy. Mm-hmm. Jimmy was good. You know how good he was? Jimmy took second in the world in 1979, lost only to the Japanese wrestler that was really Takada, who was like a couple levels above Beloglazov.
Right.
So if it wasn't for a guy because Jimmy beat Anatoly Beloglazov, and I was told Anatoly was probably better than Sergei. So Jimmy had built himself up to be a legitimate guy. He made the Olympic team, by the way, in '76. Jim did, while in college. He took an Olympic redshirt year and made the Olympic team in '76. Came back at '77 and became a national champion. So Jimmy, having him in the room was inspirational. We drilled together too. I mean, we all knew the same technique. And so when the boycott happened, Jimmy didn't even wrestle in the Olympic trials. Neither did I, because the boycott was imminent then. So to me, it didn't mean anything to go just make the team. And so they had the trials. The trials were in Madison, of all places, and I didn't even wrestle in them.
Wow.
And neither did Jimmy, neither did Jack. You may have wrestled with Jack Reinhorn too, maybe.
Didn't wrestle, no.
And so that's how devastating it was for a lot of us. But there were a lot of people who did wrestle, like Schultz wrestled.
Yeah.
He won the trials and all that. It was my coach that, in his wisdom of knowing his athletes, I credit him with getting me on that Olympic team in 1980, because he challenged me by saying that I should enter the trials, which I did, that I should go to the camp to make the team, which I wasn't going to go. And the reverse psychology thing doesn't work on everybody. When they try to just say something to get you mad, then you just you just do just the opposite, just to prove the person wrong, you know?
Like, go ahead and stay home.
Yeah.
Just don't do it.
So, yes, I was trying to think of this, that was, so he came
Don't
to
put
me,
yourself out.
but the way that he did it was, oh, you're gonna let Dave Schultz make the Olympic team? I said, well, it doesn't really matter. He said, Lee, one day it's gonna be important to you. The record books will be there, and your name will be there all up until 80, and then Dave's name will be there. Do you want to let that happen? I'm like, well, it doesn't matter. Well, his name's going to be there, and you're the better guy. So let the history books show that you were the best guy right up until the boycott. I'm like, oh man. So I go out and I was a little better than Dave then, so it wasn't like I was being overconfident or cocky or anything, but I knew I could beat him, so I went there and I beat him to make the team, and then we got invited to the White House and all that. And an interesting thing, and never, since we're videoing this will be the first time this will ever be on video though, but when we had the Olympic trials, just like, they didn't have the fancy names like Final X like they do now. I like the fancy names, but it was a similar process with the mini camp and the ladder and all that stuff. So because I didn't wrestle in the Olympic trials, I had to start at the bottom of the ladder. So I put myself in a big hole. But because there wasn't Olympics, there wasn't the depth but Schultz was there though. So I had to beat him to make that team. So I beat a couple guys, and then then it was Schultz, so I beat him 2 matches in a row. And the final match, I guess that would be called, like, what's right before Final X? What would be that?
That'd be the trials.
So the trials.
Just a simple trial.
So the trials, so that's where but Schultz was there, and yeah, so that'd be the trial. So now the Final X part, where you have the 2 out of 3, Schultz had a boil on his neck. So I'm sitting there and I'm warming up, and they were having all the other matches and seeing people crowned Olympians and blah, blah, blah. So I'm waiting my turn, and it was, okay, now I'm here. I'm all in, I want to make the Olympic team. I knew we weren't going to go, but still, I'm ready to go. And then Gable comes up to me, right literally, like, maybe about 5 minutes before I had to wrestle, and said, you're not going to wrestle. Dave has a boil on his neck, and we're going to give him a couple weeks to heal. And I'm at the event, we're there wrestling, whistles blowing, and I'm in wherever we're at, away from home. And so I got to get back on a plane, go back to Madison, and just stay ready, mentally ready for 2 weeks. And then I fly back out to Brockport, New York. I think it was Brockport, New York. And a gym, nobody in the gym, just I don't even think Gable was there. Just officials, me and Schultz, and that was it. And we had to wrestle the best of 3 matches. And the rooms were closed, there's nobody in, no fans, nothing, just an empty gym. So it was a battle. Schultz wanted to make the team. He was younger, and it was just a battle, man. And then I had to wrestle again, and I beat him 2 times, so now I'm on the team. It was such an empty victory. It's like, okay, I'm on the team.
We made it, but we're not going anywhere.
No, nowhere, except to the White House for this fabricated thing that Jimmy Carter had for the. And I went. I got them. My parents got. It was more from the people you could invite. They give you 2 free tickets to go, so my parents got to go, and Dad got to shake the president's hand. It was kind of for a guy, for my dad, for a guy like my father. He never would have, in his wildest imagination, he would actually be in the presence of the president of the United States and actually get to shake his hand. So. And he talked with people there. It was kind of, I felt proud that I could do that for my parents, my mom and dad, but...
Obviously a bit bittersweet, because
oh my gosh,
shaking the president's hand, the very guy that...
Yeah, I wanted to punch him.
Yeah, the very guy that...
Everybody there wanted to. I probably wouldn't be here right now if I punched him, but everybody wanted to. But we got close to the president, so when you think about the security issues of that, and these Secret Service people were highly trained, so you couldn't really tell who they were. Some, they want to make it obvious who they are, but really, I remember we got real close to the president. We all got very close to him, shaking his hand. And
no high single,
he was gracious. Of course, I think he had a good heart. I think he wanted to do the right thing in terms of his presidency. Not just focusing on that one decision, obviously. Life's bigger than sports, and I can't even imagine what it'd be like trying to be the president of these United States, all the decisions they have to make, and the compromises they have to make, and the stuff that's not fair. And Because there's a lot of stuff, decisions they make that aren't fair to certain people. You know,
Lee, was there any conversation between like yourself and the other athletes about what in the world, as teammates, I mean, you're traveling, looking forward to going to the Olympics, and now we're not going. I mean, it's a little bit different, obviously, than a college team or a high school team, but these guys are teammates of yours and you're going. Was there communication back then? Didn't have social media, but was there talk between the team about where this was all at?
Yeah, it was, and it's amazing. It's kind of even hard to even put it into a context without social media now, because we've had it so long that to rely on a phone call, a landline phone call, and a letter. A lot more things were written back then, and yeah, just through written and phone calls. That's all. So we did pick up the phone. We talked to each other. We typically were in environments where we were training around each other. Jimmy Haynes was training there, and he was legit. The guy was going to make the team too. So coming out of the Wisconsin wrestling, we had Russ, myself, and Jimmy, you know, and we had two other guys who were pretty close. So we had a good nucleus of people there that were constantly training. And
guys, like you had Stephen Barrett on the team, right? And he didn't travel.
He didn't travel, yeah. I'm not sure what he was training out of, but yeah, he won the Olympic trials.
Yeah.
He beat Chuck Agler, but he didn't try after that, because once people knew the boycott was in it, they just didn't come. I mean, how can you change your whole life around and go out to the final trials for nothing, you know? Yeah. But my coach, though, back to the original story, my coach kind of convinced me, maybe because he knew me so well, he convinced me to go out there and at least get my name in that spot as Olympian. And he said, one day it might be important to you. And it was, because I did make the Olympic team 4 years later. So I never would be an Olympian if I hadn't done what he prompted me to do. And it was, you know, it wasn't easy. My first world team was done the same way. That same coach, Dwayne Cloud. That was 1978. I just finished my senior in college. After a grueling 4 years, I won 3 national titles, took second as a freshman. I just wanted a break. And I didn't do a whole lot of summer wrestling. There wasn't a lot to do, but every year there was a major event. Like my freshman summer, I made the junior world team. My sophomore summer, that was the Olympic year. I was an alternate on that team. My junior summer, I tried out for the World University Games team, and I got beat by Chalice, so I didn't make that team. So now my senior year, I was like ready for a break, and my coach came up to me again, said, "Lee, I think it's time for you to maybe try to put your focus on the Olympics." "Coach, I am." "Well, you know, why don't you try to make this world team?" Said, "Nate, you only have 2 years before 80, so you should maybe try to get on that team." And I'm like, "No." And Madison, Wisconsin, for anyone who's been in Madison, Wisconsin in the spring and summer,
boating.
It's beautiful.
It's nice.
It's very nice. You could move there thinking, I'm going to love it here until wintertime sets in. But and so I was enjoying being in Madison, Wisconsin. Literally, I mean, I was on the lake. I was on sailboats. I was, you know, you start dating a little bit then. I mean, it's just all of it's fun. And the sun's out, and he's telling me he wants me to go try out to make the world team. I never, and I wasn't a skilled freestyler, obviously. That story I told you before. And I hadn't really dug in and started learning freestyle yet. But he got me. He said, okay. And Yeagle was one. He was sitting number 1 on the ladder. Mark Cholo was second. He said, "Lee, you could beat those 2 guys. Why'd you go make the world team?" I'm like, are you serious? And so, because I didn't wrestle in the trials, I had to start at the bottom of the ladder. Now that was a ladder with the depth, because that was just a world team. So it was, I'm in the mini tournament, and Schultz is in the mini tournament, because he wrestled in the world team trials in 180. Dave's like a free spirit. He just entered at 180, and he got beat by John Peterson, and you know he wasn't going to make the team, but he was wrestling. He beat some people and then lost to John Peterson. So now in the mini tournament, he's serious now. So now he's at 74 kilos, and I'm in the mini tournament with him and Joe Carr. You know, Joe Carr was, you know, just a stud. And my first match was with Joe Carr. I beat him 6-1, and then my next matches with Schultz, and I beat him 3-3 criteria. So I'm thinking I'm moving on out of the mini tournament to wrestle the 4th place. I mean, now I'm in the 4th place spot, because I win the mini tournaments, and I'm going to wrestle the number 3 guy, which is Roy Oliver. And Mark Shaw was 2, and Diego was number 1. Gable comes up to me and says, Lee, you have to wrestle Schultz again. And I'm like, and back then, it was my first team. I didn't really know any better. Not that I had a choice in the matter, but I mean, had I been more experienced, maybe my extra knowledge would have been detrimental because I would have saw it as something negative. I would have wondered, why is he doing this? I don't know what thoughts would have crept in my mind. I would have been real negative about the whole thing. But the way I thought about it was, it's my first time there. It's his team. I guess he can do whatever he wants with his team. So he wants me to wrestle him again, so I just start warming up. And I'm going to wrestle Dave again. I beat him 9-2 then, because I was a little pissed off. I tended to wrestle a little, I was a little bit, didn't know why he did that. It was like, you know, I don't know if it was favors. No, it's not that he was favoring Dave. I think he was just trying to get the best team. And I think he thought Dave should be in there, probably, trying for a spot. Because Dave, as you know, went to Tbilisi in high school and all that kind of stuff. And so to have Dave knocked out so early, I think I don't know, I think he thought our team might be stronger, maybe if Dave was in there. But then he had his wrestler, Yegla, at the top. And I think maybe when I really try to analyze it, I mean, Dave could probably beat Yegla too, but Yegla has beaten Dave before, you know. Because Dave was so young, he was entering these college tournaments, he was young. But I really think Gable thought that Yegla had probably a better shot at beating Dave than beating me. I really think ultimately that was a chance, that was he gave Dave a little bit of a break. And if Dave could have won that match, guess what? I'm not getting a second match.
Right. You know, that's interesting, because you think about how the sport has evolved a lot in that regard. And it's like, you think about now, like Bill Zadig saying, hey, we won another match with so-and-so to wrestle this guy who just won.
It would never happen.
Yeah, it's like today, but back then, you know, it's sort of like...
It'd be mutiny.
People said that happened with him and Bobby Douglas. When Bobby beat him for the world team, they said, hey, you guys are going to wrestle again.
It was like 6 or 7 times.
Yeah. It's like just one time Gabe was like, he goes, I'm not wrestling again. He got the spot.
Yes.
He goes, I also had hurt my neck, so he said, I didn't really want to wrestle him again.
Yeah.
But he said they were willing to give me another shot to see if I could beat him to take that. And there wasn't really that sense of fairness.
And you're right, and I want to repeat that again. If I would have, and I could beat him, 3-3 criteria. I know it's close, but you know, I scored 2 activity points and a stalling point. You know, so Dave had like, I think he had an actual activity point, but then he had 2 stalling points. So I had more activity points. That's why I won the criteria. Let's move on. But the fact is that now, if he'd beat me by criteria, I don't know if they would have gave me another break. I don't think so.
Might have been game over.
It might have been game over, and I knew that. It was like, because it's Gable's team, I'm a newcomer here, this is how they do things here, so we better figure this out. And I'm not criticizing Dan for that, because he's the single reason why I probably won, because we worked out all the time after that. And he helped me fine-tune the skills that I needed to be a world champion that year. Which he would have done with anybody. You know, Dan was he worked with people that wanted to work with him. He ran tough practices, but by the time they were over, most people wanted to get out to get a break. But we would stay and just wrestle. I couldn't get enough of that with him.
Thank you for joining us for part 1 of Lee Kemp. We'll have part 2 coming out real soon. Check on Spotify or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. And thanks for joining the National Coaches Education and National Coaches Council Heads Up podcast.